Hi, this is Noelle from Reordering, Inc. We're welcoming today Erica Bowen for our first ever Reord Chats taping at her beautiful studio, again at World Arts East. I want to say eat. Maybe porque tengo hambre, pero no, I've already eaten. You know I already ate. In Red Hook, in Brooklyn in the house. Even though this has become, very trendy. Tú sabes, Red Hook is like she. But it's a beautiful, beautiful space. Thank you so much, Erica, for taking the time from your stretching and your dancing and all the fun things that you guys do. And the Pilates to talk to us. But yeah, I've, as you guys know, when I started the vlog, I wanted it to first start with the people that I've worked with. And that have done projects with me at Reorg, and the people, my extended team, that have people that have done projects with me and my extended team, and I've been fortunate throughout my years working that I have an amazing colleagues that I, within that roster of people that I know, and Erica's one of them. She's not just fabulous. I mean, her dance and her movement is intoxicating, and the people that she works with are amazing as well. So, because it's a group effort, right? So, so let's start off with the cliche of how you met. We're not gonna say your journey because I feel like everybody overplays. What's your journey? Not to dismiss anybody, but I'm not a journey type of girl. And the people that I work with are not journey type of people. I mean, they have a journey, pero eso más con arroz con mango than anything. Mm-hmm. But in a good way, not like drama, because we're like, as you can see, we're very like, drama, toxic energy free here. So yeah, tell them how we met. I mean, I can tell them, but
You want to start and I just like
segue in? All right, so this is actually good because this segues good into what we do, which of course will be part of the conversation. But Erica actually I met because I was doing the Go Caribbean conference, which we were the event planners and managers. And of course, being Cubana, there was a cultural element really about starting the discussion within the Latin Caribbean diaspora and the English-speaking Caribbean diaspora, which was a conversation that still, sadly, isn't really, we don't mingle a lot. Like we mingle, but we don't really do a lot of business together. We don't really, when you say the Caribbean, people always exclude the Latin Caribbean countries. Sadly, the Caribbean is always considered the English-speaking Caribbean, but that's fine. The conversation started and it's continued, and that's the most important. All you can do is start, right? But of course, Erica being, and this is what I'll get into a little bit about Erica's background again, she'll segue into that. It was like, who were the top people that I want on our Cuba panel? We had some amazing people from the New York Times come in. We had my very good friend, Fernanda's former NYPD detective and investor in Cuba currently. And of course, we had our lovely Erica Bowen, who spoke on an artistic approach from the pen. And having been an LA native, so check this out, like this is awesome. I know it's like exotic, but it is. She's an LA born dancer, professional dancer since what age?
Since probably coming out of the
womb. Literally.
Yeah, definitely.
From what part of LA? I mean, all over.
From Los Angeles, Inglewood, actually.
Inglewood. And yeah, so, but then she went to school in Cuba up to what age?
One of the important things is also that I still have trips that go to Cuba, and right. I still go there to study, and I have friends and I have family as well, but mostly like in my teens, I was in Cuba up until young adults, and then from there, I came back to the United States and I was touring and performing professionally.
Right. So it's awesome, right? Like most people go there, and her parents decided to go to Cuba. We can touch upon that a little bit later. Yeah, so that was amazing. So, she can speak not just from an educational perspective, but like she mentioned, having family there, she had the opportunity that as a Cuban American, I sadly did not. And I think because I'm Cuban American, I didn't have that opportunity versus she was American with Cuban family. So I feel like, the Castro regiment, quote unquote, was like, okay, you can come in, but I don't know, we're part of Cuba. What are your political past ties? So you can't come in. Yeah. So she got to go, but it was a great experience. And again, we'll elaborate more on that. And yeah, the panel was great, the Go Caribbean, and we'll have pictures of that. As you could see Erica talking about it a little bit. She's very serious and none dancing. ensemble. But you can definitely come see the dance and the artistic come through in the photographs and in the conversations, which we might we'll see later on towards the end when we wrap up little tidbits of the conversation of Erica when she spoke about, again, Cuba and at the time what was going on culturally. And it was a time when Cuba had just opened the embargo a little bit. Obama at the end of his second term. So a lot of things were happening. He had just passed, but we won't get into that. So, what are we talking about today? The benefits of dance and how to organize your body to the rhythm of music. And what does that mean, right? What is it? Which we'll go into so much, right, Erica?
Definitely.
So, we don't want to touch and be negative that COVID and pandemic, but this is a time where I feel like you're so much more needed than before. So what would you say? What is the rhythm of dance? Like, what is the movement? What's the conversation right now in that space? Like, what's your perception? Like, what's your
especially during COVID right now? Dance is so important. Not just for me as someone who is a dancer, an artist, a choreographer, but just for any individual that wants to feel connected to their body, and that's so important right now, especially with COVID, because especially once February hit and we were all at home for 4 or 5 months, where there's this opportunity where you feel like, oh, I have all this time and I should take this time to be more connected, be it physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. But what was happening and the unknown and fear sort of can take you away from that. And so dance is this wonderful opportunity, even if you're not a dancer. We have this saying where it's if you can just move a part of your body, if you can walk, you can dance. And you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to, be a professional, but it's this opportunity to meld and fuse and hear the music and the sounds that are around you and connect that to your body.
Right. Okay. So reorganize your thoughts, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. Which I know you guys are probably like, here she goes again, saying reorganize 20 times. But look, guys, everything is about organizing yourself, right? Body, mind, or soul in this case.
Definitely, because when something is sort of off kilter, it definitely affects another part of your life.
Right.
And that can manifest in your job and how you think and how you feel. So moving the body through, dance, through listening to music, through yoga, through some sort of wellness treatment offers you the opportunity to feel more connected, because when you feel more connected to what it is that you've been given, your body, then you're more powerful in your life, and you're more powerful in the world.
Right. That makes sense. So just to piggyback, to add to that, speaking about the world and connectivity, how has it been? How do you think technology changes, our new normal? How do you think it's impacted the world of arts? I know we touched about it, but what would you say? Good, bad, or the same? Obviously we know that it's impacted from the performing arts, right? I'm sure from your perspective as well, the theaters being closed, off-Broadway or Broadway, live performances, even though they're gradually coming back and we're learning new ways of being creative, hence the vlog. But, what would you say, or, what are, based on World Art East, what are areas that you guys are implementing, kind of this new sphere that we're in, and what would you suggest? Or what do you, you and your team?
So in reference to technology and how it's impacted specifically the art world and us as a new business is, I feel like we're really being challenged. The old way of I'm not going to use social media in order to talk about who we are or connect or show what it is that we do, you're being challenged in that. Mm-hmm. So it's how is it that I use social media or Zoom classes or online classes, online forums, in order to continue to share what it is that we do, mm-hmm. so that people don't feel isolated, mm-hmm. So that they can still connect in some way to what they love. And another thing that's happened, a challenge from, for instance, a friend who was teaching classes, in person. And then once COVID happened and it was you could only teach online for a period of time, is a lot of, the students or participants felt disconnected. And learning that in-person connection is truly valuable. I think that a lot of times, like, we're on our smartphones, or you're on the computer or tablets or whatever, and we sort of take it for granted that, like, oh, I could just live my entire life using this smartphone, and I would never need to be with another person. And then when you're actually in that situation where you can't be with another person that we were in, for the past 4 or 5 months, then you realize how important it is to connect with another person. And so it's like, okay, so if I'm, teaching a class and it's in person, but it's less people, having that connection, but then how do I share that connection through a Zoom class? Right. So those are some of, I guess, like, the challenges, but they're also the rewards as well, because I think we've all been taught something about that.
And I think to your point, I think, for those that we've always had the FaceTime and the WhatsApp, right? That's been an evolution for the past, 10 years, Instagram, that whole era. But I think now, at first it was like, oh, yeah, I could call Erica, or I could call a friend if you don't have that significant other, or just person, roommate, whatever it may be, your dog or pet, in your space to share it with, or even when you do and you just want to get out of your daily element. But now having, at least seeing someone, this is where the Zooms and the WhatsApp and the video calls have become explosive, because you feel like, at least if you see them, there's a sense of touch and feel that you can at least, it might seem small, but like, literally, if you can put your hands on the screen, there's a sense of communication, like physical communication, so like you said, we're learning, right? This is all, and we're going to continue learning. And so, just to go back a little bit on your upbringing and your experiences going into Cuba, and, talking about, like, Cuba right now. I don't know if you want to speak on when was the last time you went. Probably, I'm sure, before this pandemic, obviously. We hope that you did, right? But, I know, Erica, you've taught at many of the Bronx arts and programs there, and a couple years ago, and did some amazing workshops. And I really love that, now shifting gears as far as our new normal, which is not just on the tech side and how we communicate and how we do business, but it's also, there's a big cultural shift, right? Sadly, it's good, and some of it is bad. I would say the good part would be because it's created discussions, sometimes very uncomfortable discussions, and sometimes very not so uncomfortable discussions. So it's created a dialogue. And sometimes there's just plain old nobody's really talking. Everyone's just going the streets, and some are going a little bit crazy, and some of them are having peaceful protesters with BC. But, the reality is that we share this in common. We are Black women in America, right? Yes, people, I am Black. Did you guess? And people are like, really? Yes. So let me get that out of the way. I'm a Black Latina, because, again, not to say that needs to be defined, but people are like, well, you're not really Black, you're light. No, there's different shades of Black. So I'm a Black Latina. Let's define that. So, the reality is that we are Black women in the times that we are living. So there definitely is a heightened consciousness. But I think, Erica and I and our colleagues have shared this, and she shares it with her very diverse staff here at World Arts Eats and Team, and myself as well with my colleagues and peers, and especially at home we share this. Because, we have such heightened cultural dynamics. I'll add a little point. Erica's not just a Black woman. She's also a Black woman that's married to a former NYPD detective. Yeah. So let's talk BLM and everything. And she's proud of it, and she shouldn't feel proud of it. But there's an advantage to that. And her husband is Puerto Rican, or no?
He's Black. He's Black Latino descendant of Black Cubans.
Right. Well. So there you go. So he's like, he has the triple, right? Because he's the cop, which is not really a cultural thing, but then he's Black and then he's Latino. So he kind of covers all the bases, which reality is for New York, which is a special city, one of the things that makes it special is that's the case for a lot of our law enforcement. A lot of them do descend from Latin or African American or Asian countries, especially Chinese, Japanese, but particularly Chinese because of the huge Chinese population and the history, which we all know in New York. So, it affects them not just in a law enforcement and political matter, but it also affects them in a very personal matter because they can relate. I'm sure we talked to her husband taking out the uniform, and he can talk about having those negative experiences. Hopefully not as many, but then multiply that times 2, right? Because I'm sure that in his community, he's faced that. Thankfully, he's married to you. And she brings the zen in the relationship. But if you meet him, I've never met him, but his Instagram, her Instagram with him on it is the best.
Hilarious.
So I don't even think that any of this would faze them. He's the guy that's like, well, let's dance through it. Let's dance with his red robe, which is the mess. You can notice that that's her husband. Like, the red robe needs its own Instagram. You hate it here first at Reord Chats. It needs its own Instagram. I'll include the URL. And we'll include at the end in the reels, we'll do a little snippet of her husband dancing. And he's not, all like, as professional as his wife, because the roster is just, you can't compare, right? It's guns and law enforcement. But when he's not in law enforcement, which he's not,
he loves to dance.
The robe is amazing, guys, and the elegance in which he does it is very it's suave. He totally has to be married to her, right? Because if he can't do that, then it's like we don't really like each other. Don't talk to me. But yeah, going back, let's reel it in, right? Because Latino people, of course, right? Especially me. So yeah, no, talking about like the new normal, Cuba, like what's that space, and just from your peers also at World Arts East, what have they seen? Because I know they don't just stem from Latin countries; they're from all over, or a combination. Yeah. So in relation to dance, I mean, obviously we've talked about the effects of from a business perspective, right, from a health and wellness perspective, but now from a geographical perspective, like how have they seen and what have they done? To sort of, and based on what you've seen in Cuba, like to kind of navigate the space, implement their arts. I mean, I know that's a very full question, but what would you say, or what have the discussions been like?
In regards
to sort of, from their native countries, or what have they seen? Like, what did you see when you last saw were in Cuba? Obviously, which was pre-pandemic, but where do you see the shift of BLM has started before, right? Okay. Before the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So those discussions, which we talked a little bit about offline, is something that really needs to start with education, right? Mm-hmm. And we all know, and I'll let you elaborate a little bit, how is education taught in relation to the arts and music in Cuba? And obviously you can elaborate for your teammates, how is it taught in their countries? Or even taught.
So specifically for Cuba and in relation to arts or just education, but focusing on arts education and sort of the BLM movement. One of the most wonderful things, no matter what you feel about Cuba and Fidel or not, is that when you are studying there, because of the revolution, one of the sort of important things for Fidel is that we honor Cubans, that we honor Cuban culture. And what is Cuban culture? I mean, it stems from Spanish influences, definitely, of course, African peoples, indigenous peoples, some elements of like Chinese as well, and Middle Eastern. And so for the arts, he brought in artists from all over the world, really prominent artists of Cuban descent, as well as from other countries, in order to create curriculums within, dance, within music, and other art forms that honor that. So when you are there and you're studying, even if you just want to be a ballet dancer, or even if you just are interested in acting on television, specifically for dance, you still have to take folkloric, Afro-Cuban, I guess we would call it here, ballet, modern dance, as well as popular dances. And so one of the things for me when I, as a youth, when I was studying there, that was it was just extremely refreshing, is that no one had to say like where you come from and your culture is important, because that was already integrated within my education, within my arts education. And it's and so for someone who is just wants to be a ballet dancer, or wants to be a folkloric dancer, to have this holistic training that honors every element of the people that have created your culture through music, through dance, through the arts, it changes you as an individual. You begin to think differently. You begin to say, oh, like, yes, I love ballet. I mean, it's so important. It's beautiful, and I'm going to be amazing at it. But I also understand like folkloric movement and Afro-Cuban movement, or even the popular dances like cha-cha-cha.
Speaking of, that was not planned. I think she did, but that just like it's their studio, right? So it's on cue with her dialogue,
right? It changes how you think, how you present yourself in the world as an individual, as an artist, or whatever it is that you do. And it's not just artists that are, involved in dance or music. You'll have, doctors or lawyers in Cuba, or teachers in Cuba that, are able to like play drums or percussion, and they understand the rhythm. So there's a real appreciation of our culture, of Cuban culture within Cuba. So it changes you as an individual, versus here is a little bit different, where, let's take it in reference to academia, or even, we can do arts education as well, where, Black History Month is 28 days, and Hispanic Heritage Month is, 30 days?
And it's not even, it's like in between one month and another.
Yeah.
Which is kind of fitting. Like, let's not even lie. Hispanics are always running a little delayed. We're always like a little bit off. It's like it's in the middle of September 15 to like the middle of October. It's like so like not normal, right? It's not a beginning and an end. It's in the middle of one month and ends in the middle of another. But go ahead.
But it's like when you have that without saying anything, that says a lot. It says that throughout 12 months in the year, only 28 days are devoted to those who helped to build this country, every element of this country, and only 30 days are for those where this country actually belonged to them before we were here. And I haven't even talked about like Native American heritage.
Right.
So it says a lot when you only honor the least most.
Right.
And not only to those who are considered the majority, but those who are, considered the minority but are actually the majority.
Right. Yes, let's be correct about that. We'll let you know. It's real, people. It's real.
It says a lot.
Yeah.
And that is not just within academia for a child, in math class or history class, but that also is integrated into arts education.
Right.
Through, middle school, through, high school, and through college, and through your master's programs as well.
Because firsthand, right.
Yeah. So that is, a really sort of big difference that I've seen, being in Cuba, not just traveling there, but studying there, and then studying here, being a professional artist here in the United States, and then also going through higher education and a master's program. And so when I see that, when I experience that, instead of asking, like, you need to put this in, the curriculum, you need to do, one of the things that I realized, I've had great parents who are like, you know what, no one's going to do it for you. You can ask and ask and ask.
Right.
If they don't understand the power, or if someone doesn't want to acknowledge, you can ask and it won't happen. You may be the one that needs to create it.
Right.
And so here we are.
Hence, World Arts. But I feel like, and not to like, be like, you're awesome, and we've always been a fan at Reordering of your work, and we share a lot of mutual colleagues. But I feel like that's always been your like mission, whether organically or intentionally, And I totally agree with that, because to piggyback, I always remember when I was growing up in Miami, born in New York in the Bronx, but growing up in South Florida, uh, I would always, tell my mom, like, so if I want to study Latin history, Chinese history, European history is taught here, but not really. It's just like a summary. And I get it. You can only fit but so much in a certain amount of time. I completely get that part. But I feel like you can still summarize stuff within a certain amount of time and get a little bit more in depth or a little bit more concrete. And that's fine, because I understand that there's a process to that. There's so many, obviously that's not our area of expertise, academia, but even in the arts, like there's subtle ways where you can incorporate those things where you're telling a little bit, a little bit more of the real story, not this facade. Two, it provides inclusivity, right? Because now we have this craze, and I say craze because not to be quote unquote shady, but it's kind of like, oh, you're black and brown, and let's make you VP of I&D. Well, you know what? You can be Irish with red hair and be I&D. Why? Because it needs to be inclusive, but inclusive doesn't just mean a black, brown, or Latino person. It means an Asian person. It's inclusivity to all, not inclusivity to a certain culture or race. And not to say that those aren't conversations that aren't had in the boardroom, in the arts, or in a variety of industries, but in the political. But it's kind of has this sort of default of I remember seeing one of the episodes of Blackish, which I have a love-hate relationship with the show, and I know we're going off record, and I know we've had this conversation where it's like, what's his name? I can't remember. The guy that plays the dad, when they promoted him, they made him VP of like urban advertising, and he was like, of course! And I get it, because history, especially modern history, it's a more of socioeconomic and a series of other things. But even through dance, we talked about it. It's kind of like, well, hip hop and modern dance. I mean, there's modern dance, and there can be modern dance, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, within a variety of cultures and races. But culturally, modern dance is not just to the Black African American community. Modern dance and hip hop can encompass from different countries around the world. But in this country, when you're taught like hip hop, modern dance, there's always a hidden, it sometimes it's technique, right? But I always feel like when they implement like modern and hip hop a little bit, it does have a little bit of that, you're wanting to learn like Black folks, honey. Do you know what I mean? And people are like, did she just say that? Oh my God. Yes, I said it. You know what I mean? And I get it. Look, if you're going to teach hip hop, I get it, right? Because hip hop, and just like every other dance, has a history, right? You're not going to be like, I'm from the suburbs of Wyoming, I'm going to teach hip hop. Not to say that you can't be from the suburbs of Wyoming and teach hip hop, even if you aren't Black or you are Black. But obviously, hip hop stems from the urban, from the Bronx and certain, urban communities. So I get it. There's a significance with the dance, right? You can't teach. But there's always this sort of like underlining, message, which I feel needs to be filtered out so much more. And thankfully, we're in a time where there's a lot of turmoil, but conversations like this are starting or have started, and they're just being expanded. Violence. But you do what you can, right?
Yeah.
So just in closing, you've done World Arts East again, which we're at this amazing space. AMP, which was amazing, which you still have. Cross-cultural. Tell us a little bit real quick about AMP and how that came about and where that stands and et cetera. I mean, obviously, I know with travel bans, it's on hold, but sort of, because I feel like AMP can apply to so much more than just Cuba, but
Yeah, so the way that AMP Cuba started was I was just like, more people need to experience Cuba, but specifically through the arts in some way. Again, they didn't have to be professional artists, but the wonderful thing about art is anyone can pretty much do it, experience it, no matter what level you're at. And through AMP in Cuba, it's a wonderful way to connect with the Cuban people on a very organic level.
And it's real organic. It's not like
culture.
We're gonna get the Havana, ballet, troupe to teach you, conga with ballet incorporated. Not to say that they're not professional dancers, but it's like, no, we're going to get the people from the barrio or from the neighborhoods and the different provinces that dance every day and going to teach you how to dance rueda.
Yeah,
and I love that. And they're professionals in their crafts. They're just not...
Exactly. They're professionals.
Very organic.
Yeah, they're professionals in their craft. And it was one of the things also for me is like many times when you go to a place like Cuba or other places, you have this, sort of trip and itinerary that are set up where you're not really able to like connect with someone from that country on a very like organic level, right?
Right, very intimate. Right,
yes,
right.
You're not, because everything is set up in such a way where the only way you'll really be able to talk to them is if you're in a taxi, or if they're serving you a drink or something like that, and that's very surface. And a lot of times people, if this is their first time in Cuba, they don't have family, they're like, I want the real Cuba.
Yeah, they do. Right, they want to go to the places where they dance el pilón, right?
Yeah.
Like you were dancing. Right, they want to go to the after dark. You want to go to the unfiltered Cuba.
Yes.
Well,
that's what, a lot of times that's what they say, but then when they get the real Cuba, they're like, no, I think I don't want it.
I want the filtered Cuba. But that's, I think, the case for anywhere, right? Because I remember when I went to Colombia, and I've had the opportunity to go for work a couple times, but when I went for Maria Fernanda, and I'm going to give you a shout out, Mari, when I went for her wedding a couple years ago, sadly, and her husband are no longer together, but, that's a side note. But they're still good friends. But I remember when I went for their wedding, Medellin, Barranquilla, I didn't realize how many close ties I had with Cuba. And I remember getting off the plane, and I fell asleep, and I woke up, and I was like, how the hell, excuse my French, I'm sure we can curse a little bit here, did I end up in Cuba? Because El Malecón and Barranquilla, Cartagena look exactly the same.
Serious?
It's literally, it has El Moro, it has everything. It's like going to Puerto Rico, but even more. And then what I didn't know, and again, she prepared an itinerary that was unfiltered for us foreign guests that had never been to Colombia. And it was very important for her because, just again, this is a little bit of a side note, because of the mindset that people have with Colombia, just like they do with many other countries around the world, but just like Cuba for relatability purposes. It's like, oh my God, I want to get kidnapped. Oh my God, the guerrillas. Oh my God, the cocaine. Oh my God. It still has this Pablo Escobar sort of hidden when you're like, oh my God, I'm not going to go there.
Yeah.
Not to say that you don't need to be careful, but that's the case anywhere you go. And it was very important for her to implement an itinerary that you had your own free time, but that you got to know the real Colombia, or in this case, La Costa, right?
Yeah.
And which is heavily, heavily Cuban influenced. Every other person there has an uncle, a mother of Cuban descent, and vice versa, which I had, but then they speak, and with the exception of a couple nuances, they speak like you're in Havana. And you're like, what? Wait, it's like deja vu for me, like the first 2 days. I was like, what? What did you just say? They're like, niño, pero qué pasó? And I'm like, are we in Colombia or are we in Cuba? Like, I kept on like going in and out. I was like, and then you love, but it's the same thing when you do the arts. It's the same thing. They teach you. And everybody there, regardless of their economic or academic, everybody knew about not just their Colombian history, but their Cuban history and their German, because there's a big German population. Their history and Middle Eastern, which we all know because it's south of Barranquilla and our famous Shakira, which everybody knows. But to your point, they teach them about the dates. And they have los carnavales, and the carnavals is another time. It's not just another time of year, just like in Cuba, to celebrate. The kids know, like you ask a 10-year-old, and they know the history of the carnavales. Not at a college level or at a high school level, but they definitely know, they've been introduced to it, and they understand it, and what the mass mean, and what does the movement mean, and why do you put your foot to the left versus to the right. And to your point, when I speak to my cousins and family, it's like, wow, and then I look at my cousin, he's like, George Washington was a great man. And I'm like, oh boy. And I know that you don't want to like show Harriet to a 7-year-old, but it's like, it needs to be filtered a little bit. And I really hope that these conversations of our new normal, whether through the arts, and use the arts, because I feel like it's an easy segue. Everybody, it's one of those platforms where everyone's like, I hate you, I love you, but then when they see the arts, whether it's performing arts or your theater or whatever, anything or anything within like health and wellness, right? Whether even if it's a technique of something or a new form of, holistic, it sort of it creates this like, oh, you realize everyone's the same. You know, it creates like a sense of unity, a silent unity almost, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It, sometimes, but also I think we can't change history. I mean, sometimes we try to forget it. You cannot forget history. History is important. And sometimes it's just not really beautiful and wonderful and something that we can all say like yes to. There were, great things that happened, tragedies, atrocities, but we learn from it. And that's what makes us who we are. And those things that were a tragedy or atrocity, we learn it so that we don't repeat it. And then when we try to hide it, then a lot of times we end up right back in the same place that we were, unfortunately. So maybe that's the lesson in, places like Colombia and Cuba, is that on some level, they talk about their history, they acknowledge it, and how does that relate to the arts? I mean, sometimes, I think, you hear, people, was it Laura Ingraham that told LeBron James to shut up and dribble? And you have that same thing with artists a lot of times. It's just like, just go out there and be pretty and be cute and be wonderful.
Yeah.
And that's one element of it, and we're so happy that exists. But just like life, there's another element to it. And that's what gives us the depth as human beings. So yes, I feel like, for instance, like in Cuba, you learn about like Mariana Grajales, and you learn about, people who were of like African descent, who were Cubans, who were in the army, who fought the Spanish, or who fought like other, wars, and there are statues. So you're like, oh, this is important, and it's talked about, right? And so how can we do that same thing? Because here in the United States, people of color, not just black, but black and brown, everything, in between, have contributed. But how many of us know about those heroes? How many statues exist? And then at the same time, when it's integrated into the arts, it's not always pretty. And so people are like, how do you deal with it? And what's interesting to me is you have operas that are considered amazingly beautiful, and they deal with tragedy. We find it to be okay. But when you talk about, or you do something within, your art form that sort of sheds light onto a tragedy that's outside of what is considered classical and beautiful, then there's an issue. It's okay. It's like, we still do the work. We still share it. And I feel like the more that, whoever it is, but definitely artists who are professional artists, are able to do that, it's like, do your work. Put it out there, and people have the ability to say what it is that they want. But the fact that it exists, and once we continue to do that, it's like things are shifting. And to put our energy and our focus on that versus all of the other noise, because there's a lot of noise. And the noise takes you away from where you need to be focusing and what it is that you need to be doing, how you need to act. Right? This is a very special time, I feel. So
absolutely.
It's just like, continue. It's and that's where like that, when we talked about the benefits of the dance, it's like, how do you organize your day? How do you organize your life? If you have to get up in the morning and you have to be active, you have to do yoga, you have to move your body, you have to do martial arts, you have to, on a monthly basis, you have to go to the chiropractor, get adjustments, get a massage, do that. Because when you do that, it allows you to completely focus and give you the strength and the force to do what it is or grace, to do what it is that you need to do at this special time, because it's a very special time. And I feel like you can either be distracted by all the noise, or you can use this, like, okay, this is what gets me to where I need to be. Let me do it, and let me move forward, because we need more of that.
And that is a wrap. Bye, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thank you, Erika. Muchas gracias. Bendiciones. Very exciting. We will have, at the end, we will have throughout little snippets of where to book classes for World Art Eats. I want to say eats. Es que el hambre me tiene. World Arts East.
Red Hook.
Red Hook, sorry. Red Hook, baby. Red Hook. We're right. She's right next to IKEA. No, but thank you so much for having, taking time out of your schedule to see us. Congrats on your space. Thank you so much. And with that, we will end our